thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Off camera, we were discussing some of the trials and tribulations of building a good-sized company quickly. If you were on the 10 or 20 or whatever year program, other people are, some of these things would have never happened, and or you would have never found out. And it's worse that you never found out. But I always believe that with QLA model, you've got a quantum advantage, and that's why it's called QLA. And you've proven that. A little background: he came to the hardcore.
February 2020.
Yeah.
I was the class before COVID.
Okay, yeah. Not the hardcore, that was a regular seminar.
Regular seminar,
Okay.
yeah.
And then you came to hardcore.
Hardcore December 2024.
Yeah, just last December.
Which saved my life.
Yeah. And so he had a perspective at the hardcore that he shared freely with the participants. And that although he had been very successful, he'd made some great acquisitions. And these are my words, these aren't his words, that you can sit back on your laurels pretty easily. Everybody's telling you how fucking smart you are, blah, 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 blah. And you see your personal net worth vis-a-vis the percentage you own of the company grow geometrically. You buy cars, you do this, you do that. But when he came to the hardcore, he realized there was things that had gone sideways, that he wasn't necessarily as aware of them as he should have been. Okay, and if you're waiting for employees to tell you that everything's fucked up, you'll wait a long time. You'll be almost 80 like I am before anybody tells you anything. And that just comes with the territory. And that's why the CEOs and the best founders of companies have boots on the ground. They go and see, and they learn over time how to ask hard questions. And in his case, his board was very well compensated. And it's easy to get used to big compensation. In fact, before we went on air, I was asking him about his personal compensation because I'm the chairman of a lot of companies, and or in some cases we're exiting, in some cases we're refinancing, etc. And not always, but almost always with a refinance or recapitalization, the compensation packages should be changed, and the owners always want them to be changed like to the moon, because when you get through your first recap, it's because you've done well. The banks don't give you 50, 100, 150 million because you didn't do well. Could you have done better? Of course you could have. You can always do better. So I was just asking him some personal questions. But I mean, he's done well, and he's Canadian, which I get great joy out of poking some fun at Canada, which I love, and I'm chairman of a couple other companies there. And have tariffs bothered you?
Tariffs have. Yeah, absolutely. Luckily for me, I've got significant backlog from last year. We've got about $150 million in backlog right now for exports into the US. What I'm worried about is next year. The awards have slowed down. So the company's gone from, the company should be doing 15 million EBITDA. That's what I acquired. And we just did 24 million in EBITDA, and we'll do 35 million in EBITDA this year, as long as everything goes according to plan. Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen next year is going to be a big question. We still haven't seen an increase in the awards that we were experiencing last year. Just to put things in perspective, at one of the companies, we averaged $8 million a month in awards, with, I would say, 70% of that being exports from Canada down to the US. And this year, our fiscal year started April 1st. We have averaged $2.5 million in awards month over month. It's only June. We're only in our third period, but it is something that's on my radar for sure.
Now, other than you, before you went to the hardcore, I mean, who should have been aware that things weren't going right and you were not made aware of that?
The president. The president, 100%. The worst performing company in my portfolio was the one that I founded and amalgamated with the first acquisition. And then I put the president there. That president was a referral from a colleague. Told me, this guy's going to change your world. He's going to come in. He's a pro. And he wasn't. He wasn't any good. And then guess what I did? I called the only man that I knew I could trust
I know
to
who it
come
is.
in and run my company, and it was a friend. I stood in his wedding 18 years ago. I was his best man. And you've said dozens of times in the first seminar that I attended, and then again in hardcore, familiarity breeds contempt. That president was my friend, and the company's been going through challenges for 16 months. And whenever I looked at the president and said, why isn't the company performing the way that it should? Now, to be fair, the company was performing. It was doing okay, but it wasn't doing what it should have been doing. And I wasn't able to see him. Whenever I was looking at him, I was looking through him. I couldn't look at my friend and think maybe he's the problem. And it bit me, and there was a huge consequence for it, and I could have lost everything in that company. And luckily for me, I got in January 8th after hardcore and initiated what I've been calling the turnaround. And you don't ever want to be in that position. I recommend that to anybody. You want to make sure that the people running your company are professionals. The consequence was possibly losing everything, as well as I've just lost the last 6 months while I've been executing this turnaround. I finally hired a professional president, and he still doesn't start until August 18th. So there's a huge opportunity cost that I've gone through over the last 6 months.
Not unusual. Not unusual. If you were on the slow growth pattern, though, the same thing probably would have happened, but you wouldn't have been as aware of it. Instead of bleeding out in days or weeks or a few months, you bleed out over a few years, and all of a sudden you're dead, and you look back and you didn't see anything significant enough to make you dead, but you're still dead. So I know that feeling. Fortunately, not for any of the companies I founded, but certainly for some of the companies that I subsequently chaired in the last 30 years. And but I never had a buddy involved. In fact, I got rid of a couple of people when I perceived that I was too close. Okay, I remember leaving the boardroom. God, this is back in the late 80s, early 90s. And they said that if that had been so-and-so, do you think he'd still have a job here? As I walked by a couple of the directors. Of course, nobody brought up a goddamn thing during the meeting. Okay? Nobody raised their hand. Because at that time, even though I had a very strong board, they thought because I knew the guy that or maybe I knew something they didn't, and I wasn't telling them. But as soon as I heard that, it was a 2-day board meeting. The next morning, I brought it up, and the two directors that had mentioned, of course, they were embarrassed. And then I said, how come you didn't tell me this last night? Of course, they had the out. Well, we knew we were going to meet today. And we were going to bring it up then. I'll never know for sure, but I'm pretty sure they weren't going to bring it up. And so, and I got rid of them. And that's why guys that are in business with their brothers, their wives, their sisters, etc., it's a crapshoot. And it just is, no matter how smart or how much you want them to succeed, your expectations are almost always higher than their expectations of themselves. Now, occasionally you get one, well, I can't let my cousin or my brother or whoever down, occasionally. But those are few and far between. And it's the bigger risk is they're not going to perform, and they won't feel the same pressure that the professional you've got coming in August 18th is going to feel.
100%. They're not going to stay up every night staring at the ceiling, fearing bankruptcy if something goes wrong.
Correct.
Because they get to go get another job.
Correct.
And that was the biggest lesson for me, is no one has the same kind of extreme ownership that you do as that CEO founder.
Absolute. 100%.
I'm hoping to be proven wrong. I've hired a real professional president now. This guy's run companies in Asia, Europe, America, and Canada. I've paid a fortune to a top executive search firm. I've done everything the way that you're supposed to do at this time. And I have my fingers crossed that this gentleman walks in and proves me wrong. My standards are going to be very high, and he'll have my full support and resources to go out and execute and make something of that company.
In the early 2000s, Sally and I and Bruce Whipple were in Florida turning around a company for a subsidiary of ING Bank, the biggest bank in the Netherlands. And we used the biggest search firm. I happen to know one of the founders of the search firm, and he passed all the mustard. He did all that. We paid a bunch of money. In the 4th or 5th week, somebody brought me a screenshot of this CEO with little 5 and 6-year-old boys.
Oh no.
And he was a pedophile.
Unreal.
Sally said something. What are we doing about it? And so I said, well, we're not thinking about it. That's for goddamn sure. So I convened a board meeting. This was a Thursday afternoon. I convened a board meeting for Friday evening. And he came waltzing in, and it's funny how you look at somebody, you have 2 times to make a first impression. The first time I saw this guy look like out of the cover of Forbes magazine, okay? And he's very articulate. Second time is when you open your mouth. But this time when he walked in, I was looking at different things. To me, he looked like a pedophile. And I said, Sally, does he look different now? No, he said, you're just looking at him different because you know. So the meeting, and I said, you're fired and your contract's null and void and blah, blah, blah. And they went through all the processes and he effectively was able to dodge. So it's not a guarantee when you use one of those, but they do the research better than you. And he had an island. And it went on and on and on. So one of our board directors, who was a Marine from Guadalcanal, he wanted to take him out on his boat and put an anchor on him and drowned him. He says, pure and simple, I will neither confirm nor deny whether that happened, but he just said, he's going to go out and con somebody else. Because if he conned us, he's good. He's slick. Anyway, but most of the time, those big firms don't know how to do it. And so I'll be interested in how you let me know. But even hope's not a strategy. Luck's not a strategy, although I'd rather be lucky than smart. But the fact that you got it turned around based on knowledge that you got from the seminar and from the second seminar, hardcore is not unusual. What's unusual, and I told you this before, is that you took immediate action. You didn't think about it, you didn't spreadsheet it, and all the other things we do to procrastinate. You took direct goddamn action, and you saved the day. And because you were personally involved, the hurt was going to be on you. And the other guy could go get another job, absolutely. You said it absolutely correctly. And this is your financial life. And there's no feeling like that when you got all the marbles. You know how in the movies, I'm all in. Or the commercials when they're playing poker. Well, when you're all in and you win, that's fine. But when you're all in and you don't win, to say it takes the wind out of your sail is an understatement of biblical proportion.